We are at the headquarters of the Rector Antonio Machado y Núñez Library, where the ancient collection and the historical archive of the Library of the University of Seville are kept. Here, in this depository, among tens of thousands of ancient books, is kept a collection of books, printed between 1454, when the Gutenberg Bible was printed, and the year 1501. They are the so-called incunabula, books that, due to their special historical value, occupy a space separate from the rest of the collection. More than this time limit, which is still conventional, what defines the incunabula period, which is also called the period of the primitive printing press, are two things. Firstly, that it is a period of experimentation and fixation of the printing techniques that will remain practically unchanged until the manual printing press is replaced by the mechanical printing press at the beginning of the 19th century. Secondly, what defines the incunabula period is that the manufacture of the book is a process that is halfway between the artisanal and the industrial, between the Middle Ages and the modern age. As the printing press evolves into an industrial entity, this transformation will be particularly notable in the final 20 years of the century, as the printed book makes its way into the expansive commercial markets. The book we are going to talk about today is precisely one of the examples of the culmination of this industrialization process. We are going to talk about one of the jewels of the Library of the University of Seville, which is also one of the incunabula best known to bibliophiles and book historians. This is the Liber chronicarum, also known as the Nuremberg Chronicle. This book was written by the German Dr. Hartmann Schedel, a native of Nuremberg, who had trained in Italy, specifically in Padua, and who must have been a person with a great humanistic culture. It seems that Schedel was the owner of the most important private library in Germany at the end of the 15th century, a library that, by the way, is preserved. What remains of it after the bombings of the Second World War in the State Library of Bavaria in Munich. It is in these books that we must look for the sources on which Schedel relied to write this general history of humanity, this chronicle that is fundamentally inspired by the sacred scriptures, but also by other secular stories. There are many things that can be said about the Nuremberg Chronicle. To begin with, it is a book whose rarity is given by three circumstances. Firstly, because being a book as it is a profane history, no matter how wrapped up in the Bible that has been used for its publication, a large format was reserved for works of a liturgical juridic nature, invested with a certain solemnity. It is a rare book also because it is the most illustrated book of the entire incunabula period, with more than 1,200 woodcut engravings. And it is a rare book because, paradoxically, how rare it is, since in most incunabula only a handful of copies are preserved, in some cases several dozen, and more rarely more than 100. In the case of the Nuremberg Chronicle, many hundreds of copies are preserved. As in almost all incunabula, to find news about authorship and information about the place, year and name of the printer, we do not have the cover. The search must be done in other parts of the book. Sometimes you will have to search in the text itself. Other times you will have to go to the colophon or colophons. We find the name of Hartmann Schedel in an anagram on the verso of page 268 at the end of the 6th age of the world, in the same place where we read that several blank folios should be inserted below so that future historians can write the events that will happen in the future. In the colophons we find detailed information. Specifically, it mentions Sebald Schreier and Sebastian Kammermeister from late 15th century Nuremberg as editors, Anton Koberger as the printer, and the engravings by Michael Wulfschmuth and Wilhelm Pladenwerf's workshop. It concludes with the book's completion on July 12, 1493. One of the circumstances that make the Nuremberg Chronicle such a special book are its more than 1,200 woodcut prints, Gothic prints of great artistic quality. taking for granted in some of them the hand of Albrecht Dreher, who he had worked as an apprentice in the workshop of Vulgemot and Platenworth. Among these images there are many biblical cities such as Jerusalem, Babylon, Nineveh, etc., current cities such as Cologne, Constantinople, Florence, Venice, or Rome, among many others. Regarding the conception of the work, the Nuremberg Chronicle divides the history of the world into 7 great ages, following an old historiographic tradition that dated back to the first centuries of the Christian era. The first age corresponds to the moment of creation and refers exclusively to Genesis, with representations of God the Father, the creation of animals, the creation of Adam and Eve, the expulsion from paradise, Cain and Abel. The second 5th ages show simultaneously involve sacred history, profane history, and a mixture of stories, myths, and legends of antiquity. The Second Age, which runs from the end of the flood to the destruction of Sodom and Gomorrah, includes series of engravings with the different human races that were believed to exist. The Third Age covers from Abraham to the reign of David, with scenes such as the sacrifice of Isaac, the Book of Job, or the Odyssey. The Fourth Age goes from the reign of Solomon to the destruction of the Temple, with scenes such as the expulsion of the Jews with the destruction of the Holy City. The Fifth Age from the Babylonian captivity to the coming of Christ, with historical episodes such as the destruction of the Library of Alexandria and several episodes from the New Testament. The Sixth Age, the most extensive, covers from the Acts of the Apostles to modern times, with images such as the Ascension of Mary Magdalene, a representation of Muhammad and scenes recreating episodes of witchcraft, plagues. Recurrent is the allusion to the atrocities that were attributed to the Jewish communities, such as what is shown in the engraving with the martyrdom to which some Jews subjected the child Simon, who would be canonized, and of punishments and massacres inflicted by Christians on those Jewish communities. The seventh and last age closes the chronicle, which corresponds to the apocalypse, with a scene of the coming of the Antichrist, the final judgment and death.
When talking about old books, we must keep in mind that when they leave the printing press, each one takes a different path that makes it unique. Some will have the spaces left for the initials blank, and others will have received beautiful decorated initials. Some will be bound in leather, in parchment, in cloth. Even a group will receive a beautiful golden decoration of vegetal, geometric elements, or hierarchical shields. Several endure in a flawless state of preservation, yet some endure the impacts of time, moisture, temperature fluctuations, assaults by book-eating creatures, mutilations by acquaintances of others, or attacks by those who are supposed to protect them. 3 copies of the Chronicle book are preserved in the library of the University of Seville. One of them comes from the library of the Colegio de San Acacio, founded by Cardinal Gaspar de Molina as the first public library in Seville. The origin of the other 2 is unknown, although it is presumed that they belong to the conventual funds seized during the confiscation of Mendizábal. The book that we have restored belongs precisely to this second group, A335-110 BES. The tome we've rehabilitated remains intact to the present, encased in a leather cover paired with marbled brown and adorned with gold embellishments along its spine. This includes gold bands and frames encircling the ribs and rosettes, which are placed on 3 out of the 4 ribs. On the second rib, distinctively, there lies a burgundy tile that bears the golden inscription registrum, denoting the initial word the text commences with. It is not its original binding, but at an indeterminate moment in its history it was decided to change it. To do this, they guillotined the cuts and decorated them with white and blue marbling. The stitching was preserved, which explains the small distance between the end ribs and the head and foot. The epidermis on the rear side, having been parted, revealed 5 pairs of rope-like ridges alongside the remnants of the bicolored reins. In addition to this damage, it presented other conservation problems. The most serious were the numerous galleries caused by insect attacks and the traces of prolonged exposure to a source of humidity that had caused the appearance of microorganisms, rings, weakness of the support. Likewise, the covers were very deteriorated, presenting on the one hand gaps, tears, erosions, and stains on the skin, and on the other hand, galleries, exfoliations, and loss of support in the cardboard. Within the picture presented, it is evident the condition of the bridles is poor. The bridle positioned lower has shattered with its middle section gone, whereas the one above shows signs of its anchors having snapped. Moreover, due to the stitching coming undone at various places, numerous pages have become detached from the main structure of the book, leading to their misplacement or loss in a significant number of instances. After the book's condition had been thoroughly documented, the initiation of its restoration process commenced. The first phase consisted of disassembling the binding and removing the spine reinforcements so that the booklets could then be unstitched. Special care is taken to preserve the nerves and the sewing structure as intact as possible. This was followed by mechanical cleaning with soft brushes. In this way, all the surface dirt that could cause damage in successive phases of the treatment was removed. In a second phase, the volume was subjected to a washing and deacidification treatment, which chemically stabilized the support and improved it aesthetically. Subsequently, owing to the substantial quantity of galleries, the losses in support were restored through the utilization of an automated reintegration device. Once all the sheets have been restored, the booklets have been reconstructed so that they can be sewn following the original pattern of the position of the ribs and their typology, which will allow us to reuse the cover. At this point, the spine has been reinforced with different layers of Japanese paper and one of cotton fabric, the book being prepared to be attached to the cover. Finally, and given the poor state of conservation in which they were found, the lids and the skin that covers them were restored. The cardboard is reconstructed with Japanese paper pulp and layers of conservation cardboard. Grafts made from new skin of adequate thickness and conservation characteristics are applied to the cover. In every rehabilitated zone, the tone is finely tuned, employing reversible color repetition methods. After mounting the covers, repositioning the leather, and attaching the end papers, what's left is the final documentation, ensuring the book is ready to return to the shelf for researchers' use.